documents expire, especially your passport, your visa if you're traveling, and of course your DS 2019. Make copies of your documents for your record. We do also suggest make sure that you keep copies of documents like your DS 2019. We aren't really required to keep copies of those for an extended amount of time. So in the future, if you're asked for copies of your DS 2019s, your institution may not still have those. So it's great to have copies for your personal records. When you're off campus, take precautions with everything. Don't leave your passport sitting in the front seat of a car unattended, right? Make sure that you know where everything is, make sure that you keep it on you, and make sure that you're careful with those documents. If you lose your documents, contact your advisor. For some of them, such as your passport, we can't help you with getting a new one, but we can at least give you some advice on how to get started. For other things like your DS 2019, it's really easy for us to give you a new one of those. So if you lose something, just make sure to reach out to your advisor and we can help you with how to get started. First things first, your passport. We highly recommend staying consistent with the use of your name, particularly using your name as it's written at the bottom of your passport biographical page. That just kind of helps you make a record of yourself and make sure that everything connects to everything else. We do have to use your passport name as it is written for immigration documents such as your DS 2019. However, the University of California will go by your preferred name in email communications, newsletters, things like that. So if you have a name that you prefer that is not the same as the name on your passport, make sure that you let us know and we can update that in your record. Your passport should be valid for a minimum of 6 months into the future at all times. The good news is your passport can also be renewed while you are here in the US. So if you notice that your passport is about to expire, or you're getting close to that 6-month mark, you can contact your embassy or consulate for the renewal process. For your DS 2019, we'll walk through a little bit of how to read it. There is a lot of information on here. So if you look at the very top in that right-hand corner, you're going to see your CVIS ID number. So that's the number that starts with N00. This links back to your CVIS record. It will follow you throughout the program, even if you transfer to another institution or get an extension. This will be your CVIS number through your current J1 program. If you go a little bit further down, you'll see the program number. So this identifies your actual sponsor. So UCSD's program number is P-1-024849. That's needed for your CVIS fee payment. If you ever transfer to another institution, we'll have to use their program number to get you transferred. Every institution has an identifiable program number. If you go almost to the middle, you're going to see your J1 category. Each category has a specific allowed maximum time. So short-term scholars are allowed up to 6 months maximum. Research scholars and professors are both allowed up to 5 years. And then student interns are allowed a maximum time of 1 year. That time cannot exceed their graduation date. And then they also have a special requirement of having an evaluation done every 6 months. Over here on the left-hand side, you'll find your program dates. There is a grace period after that final date of your J1 program. The grace period is 30 days, and it's meant for recreational activities, planning your return home, packing, things like that. You can't use it to continue your work or research, but it does give you some time so that you don't have to leave right away. You have time if you want to go visit Disneyland or see Seattle, or you just need some time to pack. Then down at the bottom on the left, you'll find the endorsement by consular officer. This is received during the visa application process. It is not received for Canadian citizens since you don't have to apply for a visa. I do want to clarify, this endorsement is meant to show whether or not you're subject to 212E, which we'll talk about shortly. It's not a signature that makes your DS 2019 valid. We get a lot of questions about that because when we amend your dates, issue a travel signature, extend your program, typically you're not going to have that signature since you're not applying for a new visa at that time. That's okay. You don't need that signature on every DS 2019. It's just to indicate whether or not you're subject to 212E. And then if you go down to the very bottom, you'll find where you should sign, print the location that you're in, and put the date. And that signature is showing that you have read the back of the DS 2019 and that you understand it. Your Form I-94, the I-94 is received anytime you enter the United States. So this is basically an arrival and departure record. You should always check your I-94 every time you enter the US to make sure everything looks correct. It should have J1 if you're the J1 principal, or J2 if you're a dependent. And then for the admit until date, it'll show D/S, which stands for duration of status. The I-94 is needed for your UCSD department if you're paid. So if you have to I-9, for example, if you're a postdoc, or if you're applying for a Social Security number at the Social Security Administration, you'll also need it for the DMV if you're applying for a license. So we do recommend pulling this anytime you're entering the United States. For those of you who come via flying, you can just pull this online. It is free there. If you are driving across the border from Canada or Mexico, you do have to apply in advance of crossing to make sure that you get your I-94. And we have more information about that if that applies to any of you. So the visa is one of the most misunderstood documents. The visa is just an entry document. So what that means is you need a visa to enter the United States, kind of like a key, right? You need the key to get into the house, but once you're in the house, you don't need to use that key anymore. It's okay if your visa expires while you are here in the US. It does not need to remain valid during your stay. However, it does need to be valid anytime you are traveling internationally and re-entering the United States in J1 status. The visa itself is not authorization to stay in the US or work in the US. And then if you do have to travel and get a new visa, keep in mind you cannot apply for a new visa while you are in the United States. This does have to be done outside of the US. As of recently, the Department of State has updated their guidance, and applicants should apply for a visa in their home country. You can contact the US Embassy or consulate that you plan to visit just to double check their appointment times, their processing times, if they require anything specific. These might vary by embassy or consulate, so it's always good to check. And then Canadian citizens, you won't need a visa. That's not required for you to enter the United States. So 212E and the bars. Some of you may have heard of the 212E 2-year home residency requirement. So the purpose of the J1 program is exchange, and because of that, some J1 scholars are subject to a 2-year home country physical presence requirement. This requirement requires the scholar to return to their home country for at least 2 years after the exchange program ends, before they are eligible for H-1B, L, or permanent residency statuses in the US. There is also an option to receive a waiver of that requirement, which we'll talk about a little bit more shortly. There are a couple different ways to become subject. There are only 2 that most UCSD scholars will become subject for. The first of those is direct US or home government funding. So that's when you're receiving funding directly from your home country or the US government. That direct funding means that the government's giving you funding directly into your personal account. Typically, third-party institutions don't count. So for example, we have a lot of postdoc scholars that are receiving salary from the University of California, and that might be backed by the NIH, for example, but it's salary being paid by UCSD, so it actually doesn't count as federal funding for the purposes of the J1. The other thing that you may become subject for is the Exchange Visitor Skills List. So this skills list is issued by the US Department of State in collaboration with countries that are listed on the skills list. And the skills list has areas of specialization that are identified as being in short supply in certain countries. The skills list is now significantly smaller as of the end of 2024. They did update it. So if you have any questions about whether or not this applies to you, you can always reach out to your advisor, but we'll talk in a second about how to check. So how to check your subjectivity in general. The 2 places that you'll want to look are on your DS 2019 and on your visa. At the bottom of your visa stamp, it should say something like bearer is or is not subject to 212E. The wording may vary slightly. And then at the bottom left-hand side of the DS 2019, that consular officer signature that we were talking about a few slides ago, they should have indicated whether or not you are subject to 212E there. Keep in mind, officers are human. They make mistakes just like the rest of us. We have seen a number of visas and DS 2019s that are marked incorrectly. So if you look at your documents and you think they're not right, feel free to reach out to your ISEO advisor so that we can take a second look at those for you. In some cases, we might recommend that you seek an advisory opinion with the Department of State. The advisory opinion is when you reach out to the Department of State and you say, hey, I think you marked me wrong. Can you clarify? And they'll do a secondary review and let you know whether or not you are subject. So checking the skills list. The skills list is a little bit difficult to read. So if you are struggling with it and you're just not sure, I definitely recommend you reach out to your advisor so that we can help. But you can start by looking at that subject field code that's in the very middle of your DS 2019. So for example, here on this DS 2019, we have somebody who's doing biology. And as you can see, the consular officer did mark them subject based on the skills list. If you look at their country of legal permanent residency up toward the top, it is Nepal. So in this case, we would pull up the list of countries that are on the skills list. We can see that Nepal is one of those countries. And then if we go and look up the list for Nepal, we'll see that all subject field codes that start with the number 26 are considered subject. So this DS 2019 was marked correctly, and this person would be subject to 212E. If you are subject to 212E, you'll have to think about how this affects your plans. If you want to stay in the United States, keep in mind that while you're subject, changes of status within the US are not allowed except for to A and G. Those are pretty rare statuses. One of them is diplomat. I forget what the other is, but typically they're not going to apply to most scholars. Keep in mind also that H-1B, L-1, and U.S. permanent residency, you won't be eligible unless you have the waiver of 212E. So in this case, if you're in the U.S., you plan to stay in the U.S., you plan to file for a change of status, you would probably want to obtain a waiver of 212E. That will make your life a lot easier. You won't have to plan to travel then. If you are departing the U.S., you plan to go home for a bit after your program, that can be really helpful too. If you want to come back to the US, you could always apply for a new visa abroad. Even if you're subject, you could still apply for other statuses such as another J1 program, an F1 student status, B1 visitor, for example. You just can't apply for H1B, L1, or US permanent residency. If you do receive a waiver or if you stay in your home country for over 2 years, then you will be eligible for that H-1B, L-1, or permanent residency again. After your J-1 program ends, you can spend 2 years cumulative in your home country. This doesn't have to be all done at once. So for example, say you go back to your home country for a year and then you want to go stay in Germany for 6 months. You would just need to return after that and you can continue accruing your 212E requirement time. And you can also apply for the waiver either from abroad or from in the US. Important note, if you are subject and you decide to apply for the waiver, we highly recommend you talk to us before you apply. Once the waiver process reaches a certain stage, you actually can no longer continue to receive J1 benefits such as extensions. So right now, it's going to be too early for most of you to apply for the waiver if you're subject. We typically suggest that if you have a 5-year program, you wait until your 3rd or 4th year. So just make sure that you reach out to your advisor and we can help you with kind of planning that timing. And that way we make sure you don't find yourself in a situation where you can't extend your program. For J2 dependents, they are automatically subject if the J1 is subject. But if the J1 applies for a waiver of 212E, all of their J2s are automatically included in that as well. There is also a 24-month bar. This is separate from the 212E 2-year home residency requirement. The 24-month bar is very specific to J1 professor or research scholar categories. Any scholar who participates in a J1 professor or research scholar category is subject to what's called a 24-month bar on repeat participation in those categories. What that means is that once your current J1 professor or research scholar program ends, no matter how long it is, then you cannot start a new J1 research scholar or professor program for 2 years. That time doesn't need to be fulfilled in your home country. There is no waiver of it either. And the clock on that starts as soon as you complete your J1 program. Even if you're subject to that 24-month bar, you can still return to the US in other J categories like short-term scholar, or in any other visa category that you are eligible for. So for example, if you're not subject to 212E, but you are subject to the 24-month bar, you would still be able to apply for something like H-1B. We do recommend talking to your advisor if you're currently on a J1 program and you think you might plan to return in the future for research or teaching, so that we can discuss with you and you can keep that in mind as you plan your future. There's also a 12-month bar restriction that is specific to the J status. This typically applies to J1 student interns and J2 dependents. This does not apply to J1 short-term scholars. So what this is if you stay over 6 months in the US in J status, you can't return as a J1 professor or J1 research scholar until 12 months have passed since you ended your J status. So J2s also are not eligible for J1 status once they have been in J2 status for 6 months or more due to that 12-month bar. You can still return as a J1 short-term scholar. Short-term scholar is not affected by either of these bars. But we also recommend if you, for example, have a dependent who's planning to start their own J1 program, definitely reach out to your advisor so that you can talk about that 12-month bar and be making plans. Documents and insurance. So the Social Security number, if you are being paid by UC San Diego, you are required to apply for a Social Security number. For those of you who are not being paid, it is optional, but we do typically recommend that it can make life easier sometimes. You have to schedule an appointment. You can do that online or by calling. They no longer take walk-ins. When you apply for a Social Security number, you'll need your Social Security number form completed. You'll need your passport, your I-94. You'll need your DS 2019. Research scholars, professors, and short-term scholars are automatically eligible for a Social Security number and don't need an employer letter to be eligible. However, student interns need to have an employer letter in order to qualify for a Social Security number. So for example, if you're a student intern being paid money by UC San Diego, make sure to reach out to your advisor so that we can get that for you. For J2 dependents, ages 14 years or older can apply for work authorization and a Social Security number using the form I-765. And then once again, those J1 student interns are only eligible for a Social Security number if they're being paid by UC San Diego and have an employment letter. So reach out to us if that's the case for you. Quick note to beware of scams. Unfortunately, this is a reality today, especially for everybody with a cell phone with email. Keep in mind that the following scams are pretty common in the US and in San Diego. Housing scams, gas and electric, SDG&E, Social Security number, identity theft, immigration scams, vehicle warranty expiring is a really common one. Sometimes you even get letters in the mail about that. So some things to keep in mind that might help you identify a scam. Typically, it's going to begin with an automated call. So a person might identify themselves as a Social Security Administration employee, IRS employee, somebody who sounds very serious and important. They might ask you to purchase several gift cards or wire money. If somebody calls you and asks you to send money or buy gift cards, that is almost definitely a scam. Please don't ever do that. They might also threaten the victim with arrest, ask for personal information. That's designed to scare someone, right? And make them think that they have to take action really quickly. So if you get a call like this, we suggest get the name of the caller and the agency and hang up, and then look it up online and call their official number to verify if they tried to contact you. Keep in mind, government agencies are going to be using .gov websites. If you get an email with a link in it, you can hover over that link to see what the actual link is, because sometimes it may not match what is actually typed out. And keep in mind that government agencies and ISEO typically are not going to call you. If they do, they will not be asking for money or sensitive information over the phone. The California driver's license, this is not a requirement typically, unless you plan to be here for a while and you plan to be driving. For short visits, you can use a valid license from your home country. The issue is there is no specific definition of what qualifies as a short visit. And it's important to remember that the California Highway Patrol police officers might not recognize an international driver's license and they could issue you citations or tickets anyway. So our typical advice is to apply for a license if you can and if you plan to be driving within California. If you do apply for this, you'll have two options, which are the Real ID and the regular driver's license. The Real ID is a little bit more expensive, but it also has the benefit of you can use it, for example, if you're taking a domestic flight. If you are taking the written and driving test at the DMV for a license, make sure that you study. There's a lot of California specific information on those tests. I moved here a few years ago from another state and I had to study too because there were some laws in California that didn't exist where I moved from, and I was even in the US. For a J1, you do have to have a social security number if you're applying for a license. For J2s, some of them won't be able to apply for a social security number. So we recommend that if you're a J2 without a social security number, you should still apply to the Social Security Administration and obtain the denial letter that says you're not eligible before you apply for the license. And then make sure you make an appointment. Technically, you can walk into the DMV, but it takes a very long time, sometimes hours. So making an appointment just helps make sure that you can get in and get your job done. And then keep in mind that if you're going to own a car in the US, you must purchase car insurance. The minimum requirement is going to be liability, but really a full coverage policy is recommended. It can be expensive if you get into an accident and you don't have good insurance. Keep in mind that insurance companies might also require a California driver's license. I've had some scholars before reach out to me asking if we could issue letters or things like that for them because they did not have a California driver's license, but were trying to get insurance. Unfortunately, insurance companies do have the right to make that a requirement. So keep in mind that if you'll be driving here, you might want to get a California driver's license. There are specific health insurance requirements for the J1 program. Those are indicated on the back of your DS 2019. We also have them on our website. If you have questions about your insurance policy, or if you're having an issue with getting your insurance set up, you can direct those questions to ifsoinsurance@ucsd.edu. We do have a team that specifically works with insurance questions. J1 visitors and their J2 family members are required by the U.S. Department of State to have a minimum health insurance coverage throughout their stay that includes certain medical benefits, medical evacuation, and repatriation of remains, and that does not exclude coverage for pre-existing conditions. So depending on your title here at UCSD, you're going to have some different options. If you are a postdoctoral scholar employee, then you have actually great insurance available to you. It's better than a lot of us working at UC San Diego. It also includes medical evacuation and repatriation of remains, which is great. So your postdoc insurance will cover everything for that requirement. If you are UC San Diego staff or faculty and you are not a postdoc, you can get the PPO or HMO from UC San Diego for your health insurance coverage, but keep in mind that these insurance plans are tailored to domestic employees, so they don't include medical evacuation and repatriation of remains. You may need to purchase supplemental coverage. And then for every other job title, so if you're just a visiting scholar, you're not paid at UCSD, you're a grad student, for example, you have the option of either you can have your personal insurance and you'll have to go through the waiver process with Gallagher to make sure that that personal insurance meets the requirements for the J1 program. Or if you need to purchase insurance, you can do that through Gallagher, also known as Garnet Powers. They'll have a few different options and they will connect you with a health insurance plan. Some notes on health. So Gallagher Garnet Powers is an insurance broker. They are not an actual insurance company. Basically, they will match you with a health insurance carrier and ensure that the coverages meet the minimum requirements that are on the DS 2019. But your insurance carrier itself is going to depend on your specific selection. So we recommend when purchasing health insurance to make sure that you go over all your documents carefully, make sure you understand who your insurance provider is, and make sure that you understand your coverage. And I would also recommend make sure you double check what doctors are covered by your coverage. Every once in a while, we have somebody who has an emergency and they go to the first doctor they can find, and sometimes they're not covered. So if you check before you get sick, that helps make sure that you have a plan when you really need to see someone. And then a quick note, recreational marijuana is legal in California, but using and possessing marijuana is illegal under federal law. Your programs are under federal law as well, so do with that what you will. And it's also prohibited at the University of California. Some other quick notes on the UC San Diego Principles of Community. We do have principles of community that are vital to the success of the university. We want to foster the best possible working and learning environment and maintain a climate of fairness and professionalism. This means that if something happens, then you have resources available for you. And we have some of those here. And once again, I'll send out these slides later, so you don't need to write all these down. But if you come across a situation which is difficult and you need support and you need help, there are offices designed to help you with situations like discrimination, harassment. If you're in a unionized position, your union can often help you if you're dealing with a situation. There are also UCSD hotlines for reporting fraud and conflicts of interest. And then we do also have options for you for behavioral health, wellness, counseling, and support. This will depend on what type of appointment you're in here at UC San Diego. But this is another thing that I recommend just familiarizing yourself with it so that if you ever need it, you know what options are available to you. Registering and maintaining status. So the first thing that you'll need to do when you've arrived here at San Diego is to register with Iseo. Scholars are required to register with us once they arrive for the first time on campus to start their program. This allows our advisors to report your arrival to the U.S. Department of State. So basically, once you register with our program, we'll go ahead, look over your entry documents, make sure everything looks good, and then we'll report to CVIS and the Department of State that you arrived, you're here, you're on campus, you're ready to start your program. We do recommend waiting until you've registered with us to apply for your Social Security number. The systems in the US government do talk to each other, so by waiting, you ensure that it shows everywhere that you've arrived, you're here, and you've started your program. Registration is completed online via iServices, so the same system that you used to initially request your DS 2019. If additional information is required when you register, ISEO will contact you via email to ask you for that. And then once your registration is complete, ISEO will send you a confirmation letting you know your CVIS record has been validated. If you change your address, so if you move apartments, for example, or if you're staying somewhere temporary at the beginning and then you find a new home, keep in mind that you are required to report a change in your residential address, telephone number, or primary email address within 10 days. This is actually a government regulation, so when you let us know that you move, that gives us the chance to go ahead and update your CVIS record too, to keep you in compliance with those regulations. You can report that to us in iServices as well, but keep in mind that updating UCPath, payroll, your department doesn't actually notify ISEO. These systems are separate. So make sure that you're notifying ISEO so that we can keep your immigration record up to date. And then remote work. The Department of State issued guidance for remote work for AUS residents for J1 scholars. That guidance is that scholars may not work more than 40% of their time remotely. This means that for a 5-day work week, you can work up to 2 remote days, depending on what your department's policy is. So keep in mind that department policy may be different. Some positions like postdoc might not allow as much remote time. So make sure that you're also discussing that with your department. But you are allowed up to 2 remote days in the J1 status. If you change your residential address and you are doing remote work, make sure you let us know as soon as possible because we will need to make sure to update your work sites in CVIS as well. And then some notes on maintaining J1 status. Keep in mind that the J1 is position and employer specific. It is pretty flexible, fortunately, so there are a lot of things that we can easily change, but you do need to make sure to keep us updated if certain things change. So make sure to let us know if your funding is changing, if you're changing positions. So for example, going from paid to non-paid or from non-paid to paid. If you're leaving early, let's say you had something happen at home, maybe you got a great job offer back in your home country and you want to end your program and head out, that's fine, but you do need to report that to us so that we can process everything. So if you are departing earlier than planned, make sure that you submit that in iServices as well. If your site of activity is changing, we need to know this. If you are changing to another status, for example, maybe you got an H-1B job offer in New York and you're going to be leaving UCSD, make sure to let us know so that we can update our records accordingly. If you plan to extend your stay, make sure to work with your department administrator. They'll initiate that process in iServices. We do require at least 15 business days to process. The earlier you get that extension request to us, the easier it is. Please also make sure to let us know if you are transferring to another lab or institution. Quite often I will get emails a couple days before a transfer is supposed to take place, and this doesn't give us a long amount of time to process everything. So if you are going to be transferring to another institution, make sure to reach out to us early so that we can tell you how to submit that in iServices and get you all set up. If you will be leaving the country for over 30 days for business purposes or over 60 days for personal travel, submit a leave of absence request to us in iServices. This allows us to go into CVIS and enter what's called an out-of-country status. So that's when we let the Department of State know that we know you're going to be traveling for a while and that you'll be outside the US. J2 dependents don't need to notify ISEO of leave, however. If you receive payment from UC San Diego, you'll have to create an initial Glacier record. So you should be receiving an email notification to your UCSD email to enroll if you are a paid UCSD employee. Your department will be initiating that. And then in the future for extensions, amendments, or change of status, if you are a paid employee of UCSD, keep in mind that Glacier and UC Path do have to be updated with your immigration status and work authorization. You're the only one who's able to do that. Our office cannot do it. Your department can't do it for you. So make sure that you keep track of that. And then for those of you with family here, registering your J2s. So typically if your dependents come with you and they arrive at the same time, you can just submit all this information to us at once. But for example, maybe your dependent arrived 3 weeks after you did, that's fine. You can just go into iServices and submit a J2 registration for them, and we'll check over their entry documents and make sure that we show on our records that they have arrived. For those of you who maybe have family who didn't want to join at first and now they think that they would like to come, that's also okay. If you didn't request a J2 DS 2019 initially, you can still request one at any time during your program. We don't charge for this. We will just need proof of that you have adequate funding. We'll need their passport, things like that. Just as a note, however, J2 dependents must either be a legally married spouse or an unmarried child under 21. If your dependent is leaving the US permanently before your J1 program ends, notify your ISEO advisor. We can inactivate their J2 status in CVIS. Please only do that, however, if your dependent is leaving and definitely not coming back in J2 status. And then for J2 employment, J2 dependents are eligible for employment authorization. They have to apply for this directly through USCIS to receive an employment authorization document. You'll typically see that referred to as the EAD. Currently, this costs approximately $470. Processing time really, really varies. We have seen some people get it in a couple months. We've seen other people take over 9 months. Unfortunately, it's not very consistent. USCIS does not have a maximum amount of processing time. So just keep in mind that the processing time on that might really just vary. And then J2s can apply for the employment authorization document and the social security number at the same time, but they must be 14 years or older. Some J2 resources. So if you have younger children here, there is a program called Mommy, Daddy, and Me. This happens once a month. I believe it's the last Monday of the month at a local park. And it's typically children 0 to 5 years old, but everybody is welcome. They have a lot of fun. They do little crafts. It's a good time. They bring snacks sometimes. So you can always contact iprograms at ucsd.edu if you're interested in checking that out. We do also have some resources available on our website for daycare, schools, and babysitting, English language resources. And then your dependents should have some kind of UC San Diego library access, but it will depend on your specific title. So if they're interested in that, make sure that you check the UC San Diego library website. And then the San Diego Public Library is really great, and they have a lot of branches. So there will probably be one near you wherever you're living. But they offer social and family opportunities. They offer career development services. They have a lot of programs that happen. So they can be a really great place to check out. If you have family here, if you like to read, if you like to meet local people, they have book clubs, events, things like that. And then all of our programs are also designed for scholars and their families. So I will tell you about some of our upcoming programs soon, like coffee hour and game night. But your families are welcome there, with or without you even. So let's say you're really busy and you just can't make it, but your spouse and your children would like to come to game night. That's absolutely fine. They're more than welcome to. Travel and off-campus activity. So for travel and re-entry, the documents that you're going to need are a passport that is valid for a minimum of 6 months into the future, your most current DS 2019 with a valid travel signature. We'll talk about that in just a moment. And your current valid J1 visa stamp, unless you're a Canadian citizen. Our recommendations when you travel, make sure to bring your invitation letter or employment offer letter. It's not required, but we recommend it. Make sure that you're using the correct visa stamp. So every status has a different type of allowed activity. For example, if you present your visitor visa instead of your J1 visa and enter on B1 or B2, you may not be able to start working again. So make sure that you're using the correct visa stamp or status. And if they enter the wrong status for you, make sure you reach out to your advisor. Always review your new I-94 after re-entry just to make sure that everything looks correct. If something is wrong, reach out to us and we can talk to you about how to get that fixed. Fortunately, it's usually pretty quick and easy to get that fixed, but we can send you directions. When traveling to a third country, so someplace that's not your home country and not the US, remember that the new set of laws will be in effect. You may also need a visa to enter that country. You'll have to check on that directly with the country's consulate or embassy. Unfortunately, we are not experts in immigration for every country, so we won't be able to tell you whether or not you need a visa to visit certain places. But if you check online or directly with the consulate, they should be able to let you know what you need to visit. For the DS 2019, there's something called travel validation. So this is one of the signature boxes that you'll see on your DS 2019. This is a travel signature, which is only needed for travel outside the US. So for example, this is something you need if you want to visit Japan and then return to the US. But if you're going up to Oregon, you wouldn't need something like this because that's still staying in the country. The travel validation is not required for the initial J1 or J2 entry. It also can only be signed by Iseo Scholar Advisors, and we won't be able to issue a travel signature until you register with Iseo. This is valid for a maximum of 1 year or until the end date of the form, whichever comes first. These are submitted to us via iServices. If you come to our front desk at the office, unfortunately, we won't be able to issue you one. But if you submit an iServices, this takes us up to 5 business days to process. And then we do recommend anytime you receive a new DS 2019, use that new DS 2019 for travel, but make sure you save all your previous DS 2019s for your records. Automatic visa revalidation, some of you may have heard of this. This is a special provision for travel to Canada, Mexico, and the contiguous islands. This is a special rule for using an I-94 and an expired visa to re-enter the United States. When taking advantage of AVR, your travel has to be to contiguous or adjacent entities for less than 30 days. You can't apply for a visa and then use AVR. So if your application is denied or delayed while you're in Canada or Mexico, you actually won't be able to re-enter the US using AVR. You can find rules about this in the United States Code of Federal Regulations. And if you do decide to use AVR, we recommend that you print this out and take this with you just in case. We highly recommend scheduling an appointment with your scholar advisor before using AVR to talk about it. And the reason for that is we really don't recommend using it. Your experience with AVR will highly depend on the officer that you get when re-entering at the border. And the best example I have of this is I had a scholar at one point who was an H-1B, and they used AVR twice in 1 week. The first time they had no issues. They entered with no problem. They emailed me and said how great it was and it was quick and easy. And then the second time they used it, they had a really difficult time. The officer continually asked them why they didn't have a current valid visa. They said it took a long time to enter the United States and that they were very stressed and very scared. And unfortunately, there's not much that we can do to help with that because really Customs and Border Protection has the authority to decide if somebody gets entry to the United States, including an AVR. So we highly recommend not using AVR, but that if you're considering it, just reach out to us so that we can let you know kind of the benefits and the risks and link you to that Code of Federal Regulations so that you have that available to you. For off-campus activity, again, the J1 is employer and position specific. The concept, of course, is that you're coming to UC San Diego to do very specific research in a specific position. So it can be a little bit strict when it comes to outside activity. However, you are allowed to engage in certain authorized temporary consultative activities outside of UCSD. This activity has to be approved in advance, so you would submit a request in iServices and give us a lot of the information for that activity. It has to be directly related to your field of research. It also cannot be an indefinite or a long-lasting duration, so it has to be something temporary and not permanent. You do have to receive pre-approval, and so for an example of something that we might approve is being paid an honorarium by another university. Limitations on activity are applicable while on the J1 despite location, so keep in mind that you also cannot work, for example, for a foreign company while you are here in your J1 status on US soil. So if you have questions about what you are allowed to do, you can always reach out to us directly. I do also want to mention that it's a conflict of interest to work for a professor's private company. So for example, if your PI has a private company and offers you a consultative position with that, that's something that we would have to deny. Because once again, while you're here on your J1 program is supposed to be your focus while you are in the US. Cultural adjustment and programs. So culture shock is a real thing. It does happen. It happens to the best of us. I have been through it. Everyone I know has been through it at some point. There are typically 3 stages of culture shock. Phase 1, the honeymoon, where you're really excited. You love it. You're really happy to be here. Phase 2, the rejection. Everything is terrible. You're hating it. You really just want to go home. And phase 3, the recovery, where you start to even out and understand that you have some great opportunities here. You are enjoying it, and maybe it is a little bit different, but this is something that you can have fun with. These stages can be cyclical. There can be constant movement from one to another and back. If this happens to you, there is nothing wrong with you. So some things that we want to remind everybody, because coming to another country is difficult, right? You've just made a huge life change. No matter how long you plan to be here, it's a big thing. So keep in mind, it's normal and unavoidable. It happens to us all. It's very normal. Be patient and open-minded. Avoid stereotypes. If you have a bad experience, keep in mind that that's just one experience. Not everything is going to be like that. Keeping a journal is one of the things that we do recommend. One of the things I personally liked to do when I moved was keep a list of things that I enjoyed about my new home. And then anytime I was feeling homesick or down, I could go and look at this and be like, I really enjoy going to this coffee shop. I'm going to go there and I'll feel a little bit better. Keep in touch with your family and friends at home. And then get out and meet others. There are a lot of activities happening on campus. There are activities happening at Iseo. There's always stuff going on in San Diego. There are a lot of opportunities to meet other people here. ISEO programs and events. Please feel free to come meet other people in the international community. Come meet ISEO. We have some different events every month. So some of our upcoming events that we have is tomorrow morning, we have Global Coffee Hour at Student Center B. I think that starts at 8 a.m. I would suggest double checking our calendar just to be safe. Global Coffee Hour is one of our more low-key events. So we really have coffee, tea, some pastries. You can hang out and talk to people if you want, but you can also just stop by on your way to the lab, grab a donut, say hi, and head out. We don't mind that at all. On the 18th, there is a craft event on the Craft Center. This takes place on Saturday mornings. It is very child friendly, so if you have small children who like to make arts and crafts, this is a great place for them, but everybody is welcome. Mommy, Daddy, and Me is going to be taking place on the 27th at Doyle Park. And then on the 30th, we have game night. That takes place, I believe, on the third, usually the third or fourth Thursday of every month at 5:30. And we invite everybody to come to our dance hall and play board games. We have a Switch where we set up Mario Kart. It's a pretty popular event. People have a lot of fun. It's also a great way to meet people in a low-key environment where you can just sit down and play Uno and make some new friends. We have all of our events online at ievents.ucsd.edu, and you can just look for ones that are tagged Scholar, because while you're here at UC San Diego, you're considered a scholar for the purposes of our office, even if you're a student in your home country. And then some other UC San Diego resources we suggest checking into. There's public transport both on campus and off. There are several recreation facilities on campus. Check with your HR if you have questions about campus ID or your UCSD email address. We get a lot of questions about this, but we can't help you with that. Your department will be able to. And then we do have a comprehensive website. So if you're looking for something and you're not sure, you can always check on here to find immigration regulations. We have an updates page where we keep all our new information about current regulations, advice on travel, things like that. We have support for your dependents, such as childcare, links out to different UCSD and San Diego recreational facilities. We have a guide on here for if you're looking for housing in San Diego, that can be really a pain. So we do have some information there about where to find housing and where to look for opportunities. If you are a postdoc, make sure to be checking the Postdoc Association. There's a lot of information available for you from them. And then this is the end of our J1 orientation. Keep in mind that you might have additional orientations. You might have department onboarding. If you're within the School of Medicine, ARC has an onboarding. If you are UC San Diego staff, there is a new employee benefits orientation. However, if you are a postdoc, you should not attend that one. You'll have a specific postdoc orientation for benefits. Before we get to questions, I do have a little quiz I have to take you all through. So we're going to make this quick, but just to make sure everybody's been paying attention. Question number 1, for returning from Tijuana in Mexico, I only need a US driver's license to enter the US. Is this true or false? You are correct. That is false. You're also going to need your passport, your visa, your DS 2019 with your travel signature. So make sure that anytime you're traveling internationally, Especially here, we're so close to the Mexican border, right? Make sure that you have all of your documentation with you and ready anytime that you're traveling. Question number 2, I do not need to renew my J1 visa stamp to remain legally inside the US if it expires. Is this true or false? So this one is actually true. Remember, your visa does not need to be valid the entire time you're in the US. It only needs to be valid when you're traveling internationally and returning to the United States. So, for example, if you're extending your program and your visa is about to expire, don't panic. That doesn't mean that you need to go get it renewed right away if you don't have any travel planned. And then the final question, as a J1 scholar, I can work as an Uber or Lyft driver to earn extra money. Is this true or false? Perfect. That is false. Not only is this an indefinite position, but it also is not going to be related to your program, right? So keep in mind that there are some strict limitations on what you can do while you're here in your J1 status. For everybody who has not yet, make sure that you go ahead and update your name so that we can give you credit for this and send you the presentation. We do have a survey if you have the time to fill that out regarding this orientation. And then if you have any questions, I can stay around for a few minutes. I'd be happy to answer some of those. But otherwise, if you are ready to head out, you can feel free to go get back to your morning. Yes. There are no availabilities for Social Security number appointments till December. What should I do? I did not realize they were booked that far out. Unfortunately, there's nothing that we would be able to do on your behalf. The Social Security Administration is going to have their own timelines and availability. I would suggest that if you need it sooner, you continue checking back. But I'm also going to write down your name and let your advisor know, since you're a postdoc, which means that you're paid. Sorry, I'm just writing this down real quick, and then I'll check your second question. Okay. And then the travel signature, you don't need a new one every time you travel. It stays valid until it expires. So you'll be able to use it multiple times. Yes, Phil.
Yeah, thanks for the information. Just to follow up on that. So with the travel signature, so we'll have a copy of the DS-19 with that travel signature, but that won't have the signature from the customs officer who validated it when we entered the US, right? So should we just keep both copies?
You should keep both copies for your record, but that consular officer signature actually doesn't really matter in terms of the DS 2019. That's just to indicate if you're subject to 212E, but it doesn't validate your DS 2019. So it's okay to have one that doesn't have that signature on it.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I do have one other question, unless someone else was first.
I didn't see anybody, so feel free.
Okay, yeah, I think you covered this, but for the I-94, so you don't need to apply in advance if you're crossing the border by air, but you do if you're crossing by land. Is that correct?
Correct. So if you're driving across, for example, or walking across, we highly recommend applying in advance. You can sometimes enter without issue, but this helps make sure that you receive one and that it's all accurate. But if you're flying, typically the airline will actually send all that information to CBP for you.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi, thank you so much for all the information. So I'll be traveling to my country by the end of this month. So can I consider that I'm already registered to Iseo after this and I can send you the request for travel signatures?
You can go ahead and send the request for travel signature. If you haven't registered yet, we would reach out to make sure you do that first.
Okay.
But yeah, go ahead and submit that in iServices, because even if there's something else you're waiting on, we can still process that as soon as that's done.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Yes.
Yeah, thanks for this. It was really helpful. My main question is about if we have, so basically if you have an appointment and say it ends in 2 years, but then we want to go about extending our J1, how soon should we reach out to ISEO about that?
So first, make sure you're starting with your department because your department will need to go ahead and extend your appointment, which takes some time as well. We typically say submit that extension to us like a month or two in advance. That said, if we get something 5 days before or something like that, we're going to do everything we can to make sure that you don't fall out of status. But that is going to cost extra fees for rushing and things like that. So a month or so should be plenty of time.
Okay, and just to confirm, if you are subject to the 212E form, would I need to apply for that before extending my J1, or is this just for like yeah, sorry, I guess that's my question.
No, you're fine. You would not want to apply for that waiver before talking to, I think I'm your advisor. I remember
You
doing
are,
this.
yeah.
You can reach out to me via email, but typically it kind of depends on how long you're here. If you're going to be here for the entirety of the 5 allowed years, we really recommend waiting until your 3rd or 4th year. Once you hit a certain point in the waiver process, we can't extend your J1 program anymore. So we always want to do our best to put you in a situation where you're not going to realize suddenly the J is not an option, right?
Right. Okay. That's really helpful. Sounds like there's some time still. So,
yes, you
thank
have
you.
plenty of time since you're just starting.
Great. Thanks.
Hi, I have one question.
Okay.
So